The Seekonk haunting, the Warrens' battle with demonic force, a Massachusetts family's home, became ground zero for an ancient malice that preyed on their children and drew the Warrens into darkness. Seekonk, Massachusetts rests along a quiet stretch of the Blackstone River Valley, pressed against the Rhode Island border where colonial history runs deep through mill towns and weathered farmland. The landscape carries the accumulated weight of generations: settlers who carved communities from wilderness, laborers who powered the industrial revolution's textile mills, families who buried their dead in churchyards that date back 3 centuries. By the 1970s, this corner of New England appears unremarkable to the casual observer, but those who investigate the paranormal understand that places with long histories often harbor something older than memory, something that waits beneath the surface of ordinary life. The New England Society for Psychic Research, founded by Ed and Lorraine Warren, operates from this precise understanding. Throughout the 1970s, the organization receives referrals from clergy, law enforcement officers, and desperate families across Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. The cases arrive through telephone calls, letters written in shaking handwriting, and personal visits to the modest Connecticut home where the Warrens maintain their office and growing archive of paranormal evidence. Each referral passes through an initial screening process designed to separate genuine phenomena from misunderstanding, mental illness, or deliberate fabrication. The cases that survive this scrutiny represent situations where something unexplainable persists despite rational investigation. The Seekonk case arrives through channels the Warrens consider particularly credible: a Catholic priest who serves parishes throughout the Blackstone Valley region. The priest contacts Ed Warren directly, his voice carrying an urgency that comes not from hysteria, but from personal witness. He explains that he has been called to pray over a family home, performing the standard house blessing that represents routine pastoral care in Catholic communities. What he encounters during that visit exceeds the boundaries of routine. Objects move in his presence without physical cause. The atmosphere of certain rooms presses against him with palpable hostility. The family's children exhibit signs of profound spiritual distress that he recognizes from his seminary training on oppression and possession. The priest completes his blessing, but leaves the home knowing that prayer alone will not resolve what has taken root in that structure. The family at the center of the Seekonk haunting represents working-class New England, parents who labor in the mills and service industries that keep small towns functioning, children who attend local schools and play in yards bordered by chain-link fencing. They occupy their home for 3 years before the disturbances begin, 3 years of normal family life unmarked by anything unusual. The house itself appears ordinary, a wood-frame structure typical of mid-century residential construction in Massachusetts mill towns. No local legends attached to the property. No previous occupants report unusual experiences. The haunting emerges not from the house's reputation, but from something deeper, something the family awakens without intention or knowledge. The phenomena follow a pattern Ed Warren documents across dozens of cases, what he terms graduated escalation. The disturbances begin at a threshold the family can rationalize. Footsteps sound on the stairs when no one climbs them, explained as the house settling or the neighbor's footfalls traveling through shared walls. Knocking echoes inside the walls, attributed to pipes expanding and contracting with temperature changes. A child's crying drifts through empty rooms, dismissed as sound carrying from neighboring properties or the auditory equivalent of optical illusions. The family accepts these explanations because human beings possess a powerful need to maintain the rational framework through which they understand their world. The phenomena refuse to remain within that framework. Shadows begin moving across walls in rooms where no light source exists to cast them. A figure appears at the end of hallways, distinct enough to register as human-shaped, substantial enough to seem physically present, before dissolving when family members call out or approach. The parents exchange worried glances, but avoid speaking their growing fear aloud, as though naming the impossible might grant it greater power. The children, less invested in maintaining rational explanations, begin reporting nightly disturbances that fragment their sleep and leave them exhausted and anxious during daylight hours. The physical phenomena arrive last and shatter any remaining pretense of natural explanation. Furniture, the family secures each night before bed appears displaced each morning, chairs turned to face walls, tables moved several feet from their usual positions, a rocking chair found on the upstairs landing though it belongs in the downstairs parlor. The family dog, previously friendly and confident, refuses to enter certain rooms. The animal fixates on a particular interior wall, whimpering and backing away whenever it passes near that section of the house. Objects launch themselves from shelves with deliberate force, not the gentle tumbling that might result from vibration, but violent throws that send items across rooms to shatter against opposite walls. The children suffer most acutely. They develop sleep disturbances that no amount of routine or comfort can alleviate. They wake screaming from nightmares they cannot fully articulate. They beg to sleep in their parents' room, crowding together rather than face their own bedrooms alone. The parents watch their children deteriorate under an assault they cannot see and cannot stop. The mother contacts their priest in desperation. The priest performs his blessing and witnesses phenomena that convince him professional intervention has become necessary. He contacts Ed Warren. Ed and Lorraine Warren arrive in Seekonk with members of their NESBR investigative team, bringing equipment, documentation protocols, and decades of combined experience confronting paranormal phenomena. Lorraine Warren possesses abilities she describes as clairvoyant, a sensitivity to spiritual presence that allows her to perceive what others cannot. She walks through the Seekonk property in a state of heightened awareness, pausing at length in the kitchen and at the base of the main staircase. Her face registers concentration and concern as she processes impressions invisible to those around her. She proceeds to the upper floor and stops before the interior wall that has troubled the family dog. She stands silent for several minutes before turning to Ed with an expression he recognizes from previous cases where they have encountered genuine malevolence. Ed Warren begins his investigation through historical research, understanding that paranormal phenomena rarely emerge without context. He speaks with neighbors who have occupied their homes for decades. He consults local records at the town hall and the historical society. He examines property deeds and old maps that show how the land has been divided and developed over centuries. What he discovers provides the framework he expects to find. The land beneath the current house carries a history that predates the existing structure. A previous dwelling occupied the site, associated with documented tragedy that local records preserve, but that living memory has largely forgotten. Ed Warren operates from a theological understanding that suffering embeds itself in land and structure, creating conditions where inhuman intelligence can establish presence. The investigation proceeds with methodical care. Temperature readings document cold spots that correspond to locations where the family reports the most intense phenomena. Audio recordings capture sounds that occur without physical source. The family's reports receive careful documentation, each incident catalogued with date, time, and specific details. Ed Warren interviews each family member separately, comparing their accounts for consistency while respecting the genuine fear that marks every conversation. The children's testimonies particularly concern him. They describe sensations of being watched, of malevolent attention focused specifically on them during the vulnerable hours between sleep and waking. Lorraine Warren's psychic impressions provide information that physical investigation cannot access. During a carefully supervised period of light trance, with Ed monitoring her closely and team members documenting her statements, she receives what she describes as a communication with the entity inhabiting the house. The impressions disturb her profoundly. She perceives an ancient malice that predates not only the house, but the colonial settlement of the region itself. The intelligence she encounters regards the family with what she can only characterize as predatory patience, not mindless hostility, but calculated attention focused on degrading the family's spiritual and emotional resilience. She emerges from the trance shaken, requiring several minutes to fully return to normal consciousness. Ed Warren's assessment classifies the Seekonk haunting as a moderate but genuine demonic infestation. The classification matters because it determines the appropriate response. Not every paranormal case requires exorcism. Some involve human spirits in distress, requiring different intervention. Others represent residual phenomena, psychic recordings of past events that replay without intelligence or intent. Demonic infestation represents a distinct category where an adversarial inhuman intelligence has established territorial presence and actively works to destabilize the household's occupants. The phenomena the Seekonk family experiences, the graduated escalation, the focus on children, the systematic erosion of peace and security, all indicate purposeful strategy rather than random occurrence. The theological framework Ed Warren applies comes from decades of study and consultation with Catholic demonologists. He understands that demonic entities operate not through random haunting, but through deliberate campaigns designed to create conditions of fear, division, and despair. These conditions make families more susceptible to influence, more vulnerable to oppression that can ultimately progress toward possession. The children's deteriorating sleep and escalating anxiety represent not incidental consequences, but intentional results of the entity's presence. The entity feeds on disruption, growing stronger as the family weakens. Ed and Lorraine Warren coordinate a formal exorcism of the Seekonk property with the referring priest, who agrees to return and lead the clergy component of the intervention. The Warrens understand that paranormal investigation alone cannot resolve demonic infestation. Spiritual authority, carried by ordained clergy, provides the essential element that compels inhuman entities to relinquish territory. The priest's willingness to perform the exorcism after witnessing the phenomena himself demonstrates the courage required of clergy who take seriously the reality of spiritual warfare. The exorcism proceeds over several hours on a date chosen through consultation between the priest and the Warrens. The family temporarily relocates their children to relatives' homes, removing them from the spiritual battlefield their house has become. The household animals are similarly removed, preventing them from being used as instruments of the entity's resistance. The investigation team arrives with documentation equipment, blessed objects, and the accumulated knowledge of how these confrontations typically unfold. The ritual begins with blessing and cleansing of the common areas, the kitchen, living room, and dining room where the family gathers for normal life. Holy water consecrates doorways and windows. Prayers invoke divine protection and command any malevolent presence to depart. The priest moves through these spaces with deliberate authority, speaking the ancient words of exorcism that the Catholic Church has refined over centuries of confronting demonic forces. Ed Warren documents each phase with photographs and audio recordings. Lorraine maintains what she describes as a sustained spiritual barrier through continuous prayer, creating protection between the entity and the human beings who challenge its presence. The second stage focuses on the interior wall where phenomena have concentrated and the upper bedrooms where the children have suffered most acutely. The priest's demeanor shifts as he enters these spaces, his voice strengthening as resistance manifests. He later reports feeling an oppressive force pushing against the words of the rite, not physical resistance, but spiritual opposition that requires conscious effort to overcome. The sensation lasts approximately 20 minutes, a period when the temperature in the upper hallway drops precipitously and the atmosphere becomes almost unbearable to the investigators present. Then, abruptly, the resistance dissolves. The priest completes the exorcism rite. The oppressive quality that has marked the house lifts with startling suddenness. All present, investigators, clergy, and the parents who have remained on the first floor throughout the procedure, report the same shift. The house feels lighter, opened, restored to qualities a family home should naturally possess. The cold spots dissipate. The atmosphere of hostility that has permeated certain rooms vanishes. When the family dog returns to the property later that evening, it moves through all rooms without hesitation, showing no trace of its previous fear. The Seekonk haunting enters the NESBR case files as a successfully resolved demonic infestation, one of hundreds of cases the Warrens document throughout their decades of investigation. Ed Warren cites the case during his university lectures as evidence that paranormal activity occurs not only in famous locations that generate books and films, but with regularity in ordinary family homes throughout New England. The case reinforces principles the Warrens consider fundamental, that clergy involvement proves essential in resolving genuine demonic presence, that paranormal investigation without spiritual authority remains insufficient, that families facing these phenomena require not skepticism but serious intervention from those equipped to confront inhuman intelligence. The family chooses to remain in their home following the exorcism, a decision that validates the effectiveness of the intervention. They report that phenomena cease entirely in the weeks and months that follow. The children's sleep normalizes. The atmosphere of the house returns to ordinary domestic peace. The case files preserved in the NESBR archives stand as record of one among many quiet interventions that never achieve public prominence, but represent precisely the work that defines Ed and Lorraine Warren's decades of service to afflicted New England families. The Seekonk case remains lesser known than the Warrens' most famous investigations, but those who study their complete body of work recognize it as exemplifying their methodology and their understanding of how demonic infestation operates. The graduated escalation, the focus on vulnerable family members, the historical context that provides conditions for paranormal presence, the necessity of clergy involvement, all these elements appear in case after case throughout the NESBR archives. The Warrens investigate not for publicity or profit, but from conviction that families deserve protection against forces that exist beyond ordinary human experience, forces that exploit fear and suffering to establish presence in the ordinary spaces where people attempt to build their lives. If you found this case compelling, subscribe to Vanishing Roads for more documented paranormal investigations from around the world. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented case files. All events reference real investigations and reported incidents.